the second of our series today. We've got Ann Wortinger, who's going to be presenting on backyard chickens. As Mary Beth said, if you've got any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A. And then after Ann finishes her presentation, we will go ahead and answer any questions that you guys might have. And please feel free, like, we love questions. That's our jam. So I'd like to introduce Ann Wortinger, who is one of the faculty in the veterinary technology program. She is a 1983 graduate of Michigan State University, and she got her specialty certification in emergency and critical care in 2000, small animal internal medicine in 2008, and then in nutrition in 2013, which means she's triple boarded. And I think, if not the only one of like
five.
Two. There's five
About
of you.
Five of us now.
Not many can achieve that triple boarded certification feat, so it's very impressive. She's worked in general medicine, emergency, specialty practice, and education. She's active in her state, national, and specialty organizations, serving as a mentor on a variety committees and positions. She's been with us at App State as our faculty member and content developer for over a year now, but she has been the chicken lady for almost 20 years. So Ann, I'm passing it off to you.
Okay, let's share screen here. Okay, so everybody should be able to see my very handsome rooster. I'm not seeing. Why am I not seeing it? There we go.
I can see it, Ann.
Okay, you can see my handsome rooster? Yay. So why would we want to get chickens? Some people do it for fresh eggs. Eggs have become very expensive lately. Some people actually process their birds. Well, I can tell you we do not. Fertilizer, wonderful source of fertilizer. I actually got them for organic pest control, so bug control. Entertainment, that's my husband's reason that we have chickens. And companionship, that there are indoor chickens. And there are also, pet chickens that are outside. So all of those are valid reasons. And I'm sure somebody can come up with even more. So these are domestic animals. They were domesticated from the red jungle fowl, which are found in Southeast Asia. So these are still out here. If I showed anybody the picture in the lower right corner, they would agree that's a chicken. And that's what the red jungle fowl looks like. So these have been associated with humans for over 5,000 years. They've been in Europe for 2,500 years, and they were on the first ships that came over here. So Christopher Columbus, when he invaded, he brought them. The Mayflower, they brought them. We've had them here since we've had people. So there are different types of chickens. So there are game chickens, which are the fighting chickens, and they are specifically for that purpose. There are meat birds. There are production birds, which are producing eggs. Then there are dual purpose. So those are birds that they can be used both for meat and for eggs, depending on what you want. And then there's the fancy ones who really have no use whatsoever. They just look really pretty. They come in standard size and bantam. So the little hen that I've got here is a Japanese chin. So they are one of the smallest breeds of bantam chickens. And she was the bestest little mom chicken we ever had. So she was mommy bird. So the game roosters, when you look at these guys, you can see that they've got a very different conformation than what we think of as regular chickens. This was the original reason for domestication, was for fighting. It wasn't for meat. It wasn't for eggs. It was for entertainment. So the Shamu, the Malay, and the modern English game, which is the bird that's shown here, are all examples of game birds. We don't see these a whole lot unless you're in a competitive, and cockfighting is illegal in the United States and Canada. So we don't see a lot of these for that purpose. So meat, these are bred to get very fast, very quickly. Egg production is not as important. They do lay eggs if they survive past their egg laying age. Dorkings, Faverels, and Jersey Giants are examples of meat birds. This one is one of my Faverels. And yes, she is that big, heavy bird. Now, the problem that we have with these is, especially the ones that are used for production, they get very large very quickly, and their bones don't actually keep up. They are not bred to survive a long time. Birds that you are finding in the store are 16 to 20 weeks old. That's it. That is production age. So the ones that they keep around for reproduction, they tend to have a really tough time. My Faberels, because they don't have to work for a living, they tend to live longer than they would in a production. Now, our production egg birds, a chicken will produce an egg about once every 27 hours. So usually 5 to 6 eggs a week on a production bird. The meat birds maybe will get 3 to 4. They can be white, brown, green, pink, blue, doesn't matter. Some of the larger production birds we see are the leghorns, the Rhode Islands, and the Orpingtons. And these are birds that reliably will produce 5 to 6 eggs a week during their first year. Every time they molt, the egg production goes down. Now, the dual purpose, and most of mine are dual purpose or heritage. Since we don't eat the meat, I give the eggs away. Their primary thing is to eat bugs and make fertilizer. So this is more typical of what small farms. Most of my breeds are heritage breeds, just because I like the look of them. So Amarok, Landshens, and Sommentars. This is a Wyandotte. This is an Australorp. This guy is a mutt. And then we get the fancy birds. So these are pretty to look at. The silky right here is my rooster. So he actually produces no meat, no eggs, no nothing. This is a Brahma, and this is a Bantam Brahma. That the full-size birds are going to be much larger. That we have Brahmas, Cochins, Turkins, Polish, and Silkies. And I've got more pictures on the next page. So this is a Turkin, and it's called because it looks like a turkey neck. This is a Frizzle, which is a Silky that has a mutated feather gene. And then this is the Polish. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any Polish for one specific reason, and that would be aerial predators. These birds cannot see what's going on above them, so their ability to avoid aerial predators is pretty bad, and they tend to get picked off by the hawks. And we do have eagles in our area. So the first thing you need to decide, what size birds do you want? Sometimes I'll get bantams because I can get more than if I get standards. It really depends on what my numbers are looking like. And it depends on what you want to do with the birds and what space you have. So if you look here, this is a bantam, this is a bantam, this is a bantam, full size, full size. So you can have a mixed flock. It's not that big of a deal. Actually, this little Japanese chin, she raised everybody else and she ran the flock. So it was really funny to see her on the end of one of the big bird's wings as she's taking somebody in for a little discipline there. So our standard size birds usually are 6 pounds or higher, which doesn't sound like a very big bird. But you have to remember that chickens have what are called pneumatic bones, which means their bones are filled with air pockets so that they don't weigh as much. So what would be a 6-pound dog, twice that size is going to be a 6-pound bird, plus all the feathers. Now, they can be classified as American, and there are a couple American breeds, not a whole lot. There is one Canadian breed, Asiatic, which those are going to be primarily our fighting birds, English, Mediterranean, Continental, and other. When you're selecting which breeds to get, one of the things that I look at primarily is weather conditions. I live outside Metro Detroit, so we can get our Alberta clippers will come through and I can have weather down to -10, -20. My primary concern is that I have birds that can survive the cold. So that's what I look for. If you're living in a hotter area, then maybe you need birds that are going to be more humidity worthy or more temperature worthy. Depends on just what kind of conditions you're living in. So our bantam size, hopefully you can appreciate, this was Romeo. And they can be 1/5 to 1/4 the size of a standard bred. So they can be like 1.5, 2 pounds. Some of them are miniature versions of the standards, and some of them are only available in the bantam size. So the chin that you keep seeing, my little mommy bird, they are only available as a bantam. They do not come as a full-size bird. When we are looking at the birds, the things that we are looking at is what kind of bird, what their breed is, their comb style, and whether or not they have leg feathering. So let me show you what we got for that. So there's lots of different comb styles. I tend to, because of my cold weather, keep with the lower combs. I have had roosters that have had full standard combs. They invariably get frostbite in the wintertime because the boys are not smart enough to come back into the coop and get out of the weather when it gets really cold outside. They all stand outside and yell about what a brave bird they are. So we can have single combs, which just means we have a little bitty comb here. This would also be a single comb. We can have rose, cushion, pea, walnut. Those are all really low combs. Strawberry, buttercup, and then a V comb, which I don't have. And that's a bird that's actually got 2 edges on their comb. And some of them, other than getting frostbite, if you've got fighting birds, those are things that get damaged easily. And we hear a lot about whether it's a brown egg, whether it's a white egg, what's nutritionally better. Guess what? What the hens eat determines how nutritionally good or bad the eggs are. The color has absolutely nothing to do with it whatsoever. That this is just the variety of colors I had that day when I cleaned out the coop. I have a lot more blue egg layers right now. So shell color does not reflect nutrition. It is breed dependent. And so when you get specific breeds or crosses, that will determine what color eggs you're going to get. If you want eggs that have lower cholesterol, that have increased omega-3s, or some of the other things that we see as selling points in marketing, that is determined by what the hen is fed. Yolk color is based on what they're eating. So when I've got birds that are out foraging during the summer, fall, spring, they're going to have much yellower yolks. In the wintertime, when they're eating primarily pellets and it's nasty outside, I'm going to get paler yolks. That is just diet dependent. And when I think the first thing that we need to discuss when you consider to get chickens is how and where are you going to house them? For me, it was important that I be able to see them from the house. I didn't want to have to go around the corner to see what was going on with the birds. So I can see them from my kitchen window. This was my first iteration of a coop and a pen. So this was a toy box that my kids had that I converted into a coop. After this, I decided that I would never have a coop that I could not walk into because I was forever having to bend over and do everything over the edge here, which is really hard. I'm vertically challenged, so it made it even more of a problem. What I found out about this fence, chickens can fly. And I would come home and I'd have 1 or 2 birds out walking around the backyard all by themselves that had flown over the fence. So we have increased security considerably. So this is what we currently have as our setup. There is chicken wire over the top that is very securely attached. The fencing here is actually hog wire. I don't recommend chicken wire. It is not strong enough to keep the predators out. This is a Rubbermaid shed that I put windows in. This is a solar panel for their automatic door, because I don't always remember to go out and close the door at the end of the day. That this has worked out pretty well for us. Now, this is I actually have 2 coops, one on either side of the pen, because that way I can keep my baby birds and my big birds separated when they're little. This was a really cute idea. It was never watertight. And we're down to again, I'm having to crawl in to deal with them. So this was reconverted back to a playhouse for my granddaughter. The birds didn't mind it. I had some significant issues with it. Yep, there we go. Now the inside of the coops, you need to have resting poles. And I actually have, these are pieces of wood that I got out of my woods. I want to make them so that they're comfortable for the birds to rest on. And then these are kitty litter tubs that we converted. We actually have 6 of them now, and the birds only lay eggs in 2 of them. Doesn't matter how many you have, and I will have 2 birds in the same thing rather than going to one of the other ones. This is one of my other coops. It's more of an open plan. The birds tend to sleep up here more and will come over in this coop and lay their eggs. I don't know what they're doing. You will see that the bedding that I've got, shredded paper. So I use shredded paper and straw that I can guarantee you nobody goes and picks through my shredded paper because it goes out in the chicken coop. Every area is going to have predators. If you don't think there's predators in your area, you are wrong. Dogs. I've had dogs kill my chickens. I've had dogs harass my chickens. Fox, raccoons, hawks, and our latest predator has been coyotes. And then scavengers, possums, and skunks. They are usually not going to attack the birds. They may be going for the chicks, or they may be going for the eggs. And yes, you do see 2 bunnies. I did have bunnies in the pen with my chickens, and I can guarantee you that 2 rabbits are messier than 10 chickens. But these very happy bunnies. So this is what I found in my coop last, I think it was last fall. This is a juvenile possum who thought that the nesting boxes were an ideal place for a little possum to rest. So 2 days in a row, I removed her from the coop before she finally got the idea that maybe this wasn't the best place for her to be. The birds get really, really upset when they've got visitors in the coop that weren't invited. So what are we going to do for security? So we talked about predators. You've seen some of my challenges. So what I currently have now is a metal door that is on a solar sensor and is solar powered. So if we lose power, which I can tell you happens in the wilds of Detroit on a regular basis, the door will still work. I can override this if I need to. And I've gotten quite adept at replacing the motor when I need to. But this is a metal door. So even if I get a predator in the pen, they can't get to my birds, which is my primary thing. We have the big door here, and you can't tell, but I've got a little fence over the top here that it keeps my little birds from leaving. It just provides an extra level of security that we can lock them up. You can't tell that I have got hardware cloth over the windows because I had a nightmare about raccoons scaling the side of the coop and going in through those regular screens. We've had lots of iterations of doors. So just the regular pet door that relied on me remembering to go out and close it, and me remembering to go out and open it, which was the hardest problem with this. This is a custom-made door. And it uses, this is a drapery motor that pulls the door up and closed. They would usually only last about 1.5 years, 2 years before the motor burnt out. And then this is my metal door. I can usually get 3 years out of a motor, and then I just replace the motor. I don't have to replace the entire setup. So I've been happiest with that. you'll see that I've got a little, we call it a baffle board, because the chickens will kick everything and keep the door from closing. So just to prevent them from kicking things all over the place. Last year, I lost half my flock over the period of about 3 months. We believe coyotes were responsible, since most of my birds were killed in the middle of the day, even up close to the house. This was personally devastating to me, that I feel it's my responsibility to keep them safe. So we invested in a predator fence, which is basically a cat fence turned around the other way, that nothing can climb up the fence. Nothing has tried to dig under the fence yet. That we sectioned off a third of our yard and put the fence up to keep the chickens safe. This makes me feel much more secure. We have not lost a bird to a fox or coyote since that time. And of course, the first bird that was killed last year was my favorite one. So I don't know how they always figure that one out. When you're trying to decide how big do I need to make the coop? How big do I need to make the pen? Now, my chickens previously had access to about an acre. We have an acre that was not woods, an acre that's woods, and the chickens don't usually go back in the woods much. But each standard size adult bird takes 4 square feet. So I currently got 16 birds. They're all full size. So we're looking at almost 80 square feet that I need to provide for them. Now, because my birds have access to a yard, I can have actually a smaller pen and a smaller coop area because they are getting out. These are for birds that are not having outdoor space or outdoor time. As I said, with the bantams, I can have more birds because they take up less space. So my coops, both of my coops are 10 feet by 4 feet. So for 40 square feet, I can have 10 standards or 20 bantams. I have 2 coops that are 40 square feet. So I can actually get a couple more birds. I'm not going to, but I could. So your base material, it needs to be inexpensive. You're going to go through it fairly quickly. You need to make it easy to get. I pick up straw at just our feed store. Easy to maintain. So something that you can shovel out, something that's easier to manage, and something that's safe for the birds. One of the big areas of discussion is cedar and pine shavings, that these release volatile oils that have been implicated in causing respiratory problems in birds. So I just stay away from them. That shredded paper, and we have a paper shredder at home. If you've got one at work, I used to bring bags of it home. Shredded paper, and then I can put that out in the garden, which is where everything from the coop goes straight out to the garden, or straw, mixture of both. I also put a liberal layer of straw out in the pen. It helps absorb some of the moisture when we've got a lot of rain, but also it keeps ice from building up in the pen in the wintertime. That I had one chicken that actually injured her leg and had to be euthanized because we think she slipped on some ice. So ventilation, respiratory system in birds is different than it is in dogs and cats. We need to make sure that there is adequate ventilation because of the ammonia that builds up from their feces. So what I have done is for both of my coops, I put in shed windows. So these were an add-on. You can get them on Amazon, like anything else. We want to make sure that we get adequate cross ventilation in there, and chickens have a much higher body temperature than what we're used to for our companion animals. So it's 107 to 109 degrees. So we need to keep that in mind when we're setting up the housing, that they're going to generate a whole lot more heat than what we would normally expect. And that's one of my that's one of my Wyandottes. So ventilation options, you can have a fan. So I have electricity in the coops, And I put fans up during the summertime when it gets really hot. Cross ventilation with the windows, ventilation with the doors open. Those are just some of the options that you can get. There's some people that get roof ventilation, and it depends on how cold and how windy where you are is. So feeding, just like any other animal that we bring into our houses, we have to look at feeding. So Miss Jen said that one of my specialties is a VTS and nutrition. So we could go down that rabbit hole for a long time. Your options for feeding chickens are commercial. They do make commercial pellets and commercial crumbs, homemade, or if you've got a large enough area and you've got motivated enough birds, they can free range or forage on their own. Now, the problem with free ranging or foraging is, do you have enough bugs and plants for those birds to support themselves in the area that you're allowing them? So chicks, up until hatching to about 10 to 12 weeks, they need to be on a higher protein chick food. I can tell you that the adult birds think this is the most amazing food known to man, and will do everything in their power to try to get to the chick food. So I have to be really, really diligent about keeping the big birds out of the little birds' food. Now, chick food just is available in a crumble because we got little bitty birds when we're starting with this. Once they get to broiler or pullets, which are 10 to 20 weeks, so those are our juveniles. Broilers are slaughtered between 16 and 20 weeks. So when you've got a bird at the store, that chicken was only 4 to 5 months old. Pullets start laying eggs between 16 and 20 weeks. That's what they say. Mine are typically 20 to 24 weeks. They take their time. And see, we got another picture of mommy bird because she was just that amazing. Now, on our adult birds, I prefer to use pellets. I feel that the chickens waste less with the pellets. Chickens, just like any other bird, can be exceptionally messy if given half the opportunity. Purina, a division of Purina, does make chicken food. So that's one of my favorites. So homemade diets, just like with any other animal, you've got to be able to balance out, complete and balanced. And that's very hard to do without being able to do testing to see, do you have enough protein? Do you have enough carbohydrates? Do you have enough fats? If this is the sole diet for the animal, one of the things that birds, not unlike dogs and cats, they will pick out what they like and leave the rest. Yeah, think granola mix. You're going to pick out all your M&Ms and your peanuts first, and then you're going to see about eating all the oats. Birds that are allowed to free range will eat plants. Sometimes the plants I want them to, sometimes not. Insects, they'll eat frogs. They'll eat small snakes, small mammals, worms, grubs, anything they can fit. It's always funny to see the chickens when they've caught a frog, that they'll have the back legs hanging out of their mouth, and chickens have a high-pitched squeal when they're excited. So they'll catch the frog, they're running around the yard, they're really excited, so they're squealing, which lets everybody else know that I've got something really nummy. And everybody else is trying to get this away from the chicken that caught it. That comes into the entertainment factor. And one thing I want to note is chickens are not vegetarians. So there is one commercial marketing firm that will tell you that their chickens are all vegetarian. One, I don't understand what the benefit of that to anybody is, but chickens are not vegetarians. They will eat anything that doesn't move fast enough. One of the challenges we always have with birds is keeping the water fresh and clean. They need to have access to clean, fresh water all the time. If they do not have enough, then their egg production or meat production will go down. So they need, for a full-size bird, about 200 mLs per bird per day. For those of you that don't do medical measures, this is about a cup of water per bird per day. So I got 16 birds. That's 16 cups. That gets us to 4 quarts or a gallon of water a day that my birds are going through. One of the problems or challenges that we have is in the wintertime that the water freezes. So you can get these underwater heaters. They heat the water right here, but it still freezes up there, so they may not be able to get enough water. My favorite solution has actually been a crock pot. The newest crock pots have a keep warm setting, which is about 110 degrees, and that is comfortable for the birds. It was the right price for me. Walmart had them for $19.99. I do keep them elevated up above the straw, so they're on a brick. And as long as you don't let the crock go dry, it'll crack if that happens. This works out really well for when we are having cold weather. Because this is an indoor appliance, it does have to stay inside the coop. I don't keep it in the pen where I keep the water during the summer. So one of the things that we have to be really concerned with when we're handling any birds, let alone chickens, is that chickens do not have lungs. They have air sacs, and they are distributed throughout the body. And one of the biggest concerns we have when handling them is if you're holding them very tightly. So my little bitty chicks here, these are actually newly hatched. If you're holding them too tightly, they can't expand those air sacs and they will die. They do have some defense mechanisms for when they get scared or when they're getting chased by a predator. They have their wings. Chickens can fly, especially a motivated chicken. They do have talons, and they have their beaks. That depending on how well socialized the bird is, how threatened they're feeling as to what they're going to be using. One of the things that surprised me the most when I got my first birds were adult birds. I did not feel confident enough in bringing home babies. So I got adult birds from a 4-H girl. And this is called squatting. That this is an invitation to mate, which makes it really easy to pick the birds up. If every time they see you, you're dominant, they're going to squat. I didn't know what they were doing, so it took me a while to figure that one out. But you want to get control of the wings if you're handling any of the birds first, because especially with a full-grown adult bird, that's a lot of wing. You want to place your non-dominant hand over their back, so right over these wings, and then place your dominant hand under their belly and pick them up. These are big animals. You don't want to be holding them by their legs, holding them by their wings. You want to make sure they're well supported. Roosters do have talons. That is not a joke. They will use them. We were talking with Miss Jen when we started that I do not allow bad rooster behavior. I will remove a bird from the flock for attacking me or attacking other birds. I have had roosters that just are really vicious with the hens. I don't tolerate that. That is not going to happen at my house. Roosters will not squat. If you need to work on an animal, catch an animal, handle them, usually either turning the lights off or waiting until it gets dusk and then throwing a towel over them and catching them will work really well. If there's an animal that I need to work on for whatever reason, I need to, if somebody looks like they're hurt, I usually will do it at dusk. And they can fly. Even the big birds can fly. It just depends on how motivated they are. So the younger, smaller, and lighter birds can fly farther. I mean, like clear across 100 yards. Always ensure your enclosure is secure. We used to have a hawk that would sit at the peak of my garage and peer down into the chicken pen. That would obviously disconcert the chickens. I didn't like the idea that the hawk was shopping. So that is why we have a wire top on our pen. And plus the raccoons climb right over. If it isn't secured, they'll figure out a way to get in. Just like with any other pet, any other animal, there are parasites. These are more bird specific than what we would see with dogs and cats, but we do get lice and mites. You can get cecal worms, round worms, capillary worms, tapeworms, flukes, and protozoans. It is recommended that either before or soon after you get chickens, you find a veterinarian who is able and willing to work on chickens. I'm very lucky that my veterinarian does exotics, and chickens come under exotics. So if I have a problem, I do have a veterinarian we can go to. Yeah. Yeah, we advance this here. Okay. So this is an example of scaly leg mites in chickens. They can get red roost mites, northern fowl mites, scaly leg mites, and we're going to treat all of these with an insecticide. That would be something that you would have to get from the veterinarian. This is not something that we're going to recommend that you get over the counter. You need to know what kind of mite you're dealing with and what the correct dosage is. So that's something that you need your veterinarian for. Bumblefoot is a problem that we can see often. Animals that are on their feet, walking around in the yard, it's not uncommon to get injuries on the bottoms of their feet. This is actually a goose that has the swelling on their foot here, is what we call bumblefoot. This is usually caused by the staph bacteria. If it's caught early, you can clean it and treat it with antibiotics that the veterinarian would work on, but it can cause a permanent deformity for them. One of the things to be cognizant of, if your veterinarian prescribes medication, you may not be able to eat the eggs for an extended period of time or take the animals to slaughter. Most anthelmintics or worming medications have a 3-month withdrawal time. So if we are treating them, then there's going to be 3 months that you're going to need to dispose of the eggs. I throw them back into the woods, or not send those animals to slaughter. Now, one of the things that we are hearing a lot more of recently is biosecurity. Avian influenza is a thing. So we are concerned with the transmission of diseases between humans and people. Influenza typically will come either from bird stock, usually wild birds, or pigs. Those are the 2 main sources that we get. I no longer feed the wild birds near my chicken's pen because I don't want to increase the frequency of the wild birds interacting with my chickens. They can also get a bacteria called psittacosis that can cause bacterial lung infections in people, and then salmonella. Salmonella is a normal enteric or GI bacteria in chickens. It is normal for them. It can cause contamination of the eggs and the meat that we get from those chickens. This is normal for them. You are not going to make salmonella-free chickens. What that means for you is that you need to cook your eggs and you need to cook the meat. That will kill the salmonella. So safety precautions. How can you get the healthiest birds that you can get? You want to obtain the birds from a secure hatchery. So ones that are participating in the National Poultry Improvement Plan, or NPIP. I have a couple hatcheries that I like to deal with that I trust, and I know that they participate in this. I have my baby chicks vaccinated for Marek's disease. It is highly contagious and highly fatal if it gets in your flock. And you want to restrict access to coops, birds, and equipment. So we see a lot of times where they'll have, coop de villes, and we'll have coop tours. I do not want strangers that have gone from one coop to another coop to another coop, or 1 yard to another yard, having contact with my birds. That is significantly increasing my and their risk. So husbandry precautions. Most commercial growers do what's called all in and all out. They have all the birds in one housing area, and it can be 1,000 birds. They will either slaughter them all at one time, disinfect, clean, and then bring in a whole new group. Very few hobby flocks will do all in and all out. I do not. The recommendation is that we don't intermix ages. Most hobby flocks are intermixed. I actually prefer to have a range of ages so that I don't have all old birds at one time. No introduction of new birds. As a veterinary technician, if it's broken, if it's sick, if it's unhomed, we bring them home. I do keep them quarantined. I do worm them. I do treat them. And if needed, we get veterinary care. But yeah, I'm bad about bringing the rejects home. No sick, injured, neglected, or abandoned birds. I've had students bring in birds that just show up on their front porches in Detroit. My rooster, neighbors reported him for crowing. We didn't have a rooster at the time, so he got to come live with us. Disinfection, because of the salmonella, because of psittacosis, disinfection is always a consideration. And that's one of the reasons I have converted sheds as my coops. The plastic is very easy to clean and disinfect. If I had plywood, if I had wood, those are really hard to disinfect. It's easier for parasites to get into those little nooks and crannies. So as a technician, that was one of the primary reasons I got my plastic sheds. You want to make sure that your clothes, shoes, if you're driving between places, your car tires. So these would be something that if a veterinarian came out to your practice, they're going to disinfect all this stuff before they go on to the next one. Standard bleach, diluted, usually 1 to 30, or chlorhexidine, which is a standard disinfectant that we use in veterinary medicine. That we all like that a lot. So chances are good that backyard chickens are in your area. Depending on what your local legislation is as to whether you can have them. I actually have a technician friend right now who's trying to change the legislation for her community so she can get chickens. Her goal is next spring. So we're keeping up on that one. That pets and owners, they expect to have them treated just like any other pet. And make sure that you have easy, basic handling techniques. We've got one last picture of Mommy Bird. And at this point, those were all of her chicks from that year. And she would raise full-size chickens. So she's trying to put her wings out over these chicks that are almost as big as she is at that time. So these are a couple resources for additional information on housing chickens, on treating chickens. So One Health is something that's very important to our program, and that is looking at the intersection between human medicine and veterinary medicine. And as we've discussed, there are a couple overlaps between chickens and what people can get. Backyard Chickens is a really good resource online. The CDC. Who would have thought the CDC would have information on backyard chickens? Food Animal Residue Avoidance Bank, or FARAD. That is more for veterinary personnel to see what medications can or cannot be used in chickens. And then AMDUCA is also a resource for veterinary personnel looking at what the withdrawal times are for various medications. Okay, so that's me and my birds.
All right, we have one question so far. And again, you guys, please feel free, type in questions in the Q&A because we are more than happy to answer them. So first one is, I'm very beginner, interested in having chickens in my backyard. Could you reiterate how much space that you need to grow them and where can I get chicks?
You can usually, depending on what the legislation is in your area, if you get a Tractor Supply has chicks every spring. Some feed stores will order them special. Some feed stores will get a bigger selection than Tractor Supply has. Tractor Supply has very basic selection. You can order from a hatchery. And that's like online shopping, where they give you a really good description of what the birds are, what their sizes are, what their temperaments are. So before you bring any chickens home, you need to, what are your expectations? Most of us, we're not showing birds. So, I mean, if you're in 4-H, you could definitely show chickens. I usually look for a calm temperament. Doesn't always happen, but that's what I'm looking for. I've already said I want to look for animals that are winter hardy. So I'm going to look for those that are more cold tolerant. And usually you're looking at 4 square feet at minimum for housing, and that would be their coop. My pen is 20 feet by about 15 feet. And when we have nasty weather, I want to make sure that they have a protected area. So we've got a metal part of the pen where it's covered. It also goes around the corner of the garage. So the garage does offer some protection for them. And so the first thing you need to do, if you live with an HOA or live in a city or a township, what is the legislation right now? Can you have them? If we have 2 acres, which we do, in our township, I can have pigs, sheep, goats, and chickens. I have no desire to have sheep, goats, or pigs. We have to have 5 acres to have a horse or a cow. So I'm good with the chickens, but that was something that we needed to check with. So that would be the first thing. Make sure that you can legally have them, because if you've illegally got them, you will lose your birds. Somebody will report you. Even though we can legally have them, I do check with my neighbors to see, is my rooster being too loud? Hens make a lot of noise too. They just don't crow. And my neighbors have told me, nah, that's part of country living. We live on a dirt road, so that's not unexpected. Bribing the neighbors with eggs is always a good idea too. We do that on a regular basis.
That is, oh, here we go. We have 1 Sussex, 1 Silver Wyandotte, and 4 Brahmas. We live on a farm in the Eastern Plains of Colorado. I would love to know more about treating lice. Currently use food grade diatomaceous earth. Also, how often should I clean out the run? Thank you, amazing chicken lady.
How often you clean out the run is really dependent on your tolerance. I only clean out 2 to 3 times a year. Really depends on how much the birds are making a mess, how much time they're spending in the coop. That I use what's called the deep litter method, which means I'll have litter that's piled up 6 inches on the bottom. That is composting, generating a little heat in the wintertime, which helps with the birds. If you do not have that level of tolerance, you can clean out every week if you want. You can clean out every day. The chickens really don't care. And I'm glad you mentioned the Brahmas, because Brahmas are one of the breeds that have feathered feet. One of the things that I've heard from the gardening sites is that chickens with feathered feet don't dig as much. They lie. They dig just as much. Chickens like digging holes. They'll dig holes to wallow in the sand. So if you have this image of the chickens pastorally hanging out in your backyard, yeah, that ain't going to happen. They're going to dig things up. They're going to eat things. They're going to get into stuff. Um, I can selectively keep them out of areas. So my vegetable garden has got perimeter fencing all the way around it. That's up to 5 feet tall that the birds are not going to fly over. That you have to make some accommodations for what they want. Chickens like dust bats. I have very sandy soil. So I have a couple, looks like landmines that went off in my yard that make sure that you have realistic expectations of what the natural behavior for those animals are. And as far as treating for lice, I like drugs. I'm going to use ivermectin, selamectin. I think that's the most effective way of treating them. Once you have done a scraping and you have identified that there are definitely mites or lice there, then have the veterinarian treat them. I think that's the best option. Diatomaceous earth can work to help keep them under control, but it will not prevent an infection. And congratulations, Colorado lady.
Any other questions? We probably got time for about one more. Don't be shy.
I mean, if you look behind me, this picture was taken last fall. And we blow all of our leaf litter into, this was an area under a bunch of big old cottonwoods that I can't grow any grass under. So we blow all the leaf litter, and I'll put a lot of the, when I clean out the pens, when I clean out the coop, I'll throw it under there. And the chickens, they take and they dig all this in and incorporate it into the soil. So it's a really good place for plants to grow, except for the chickens are there. And my chances of getting plants to grow with the chickens digging everything up are not real good. So again, realistic expectations about what's going to happen with those animals. And if you've got grass inside of a new pen with chickens, you won't have grass in 2 weeks. It will be gone.
Well, there's no more questions. So thank you guys. Thank you, Anne. This is amazing as always. And we really appreciate you guys showing up and tuning in for our presentations.
And if there's any questions after you get off, let me know. Not a problem. I will talk chickens with anyone, anytime.
Thanks, guys. Have a great Friday. Happy weekend.